So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is after the mini update to the tourney build, which was implemented just after round 2 of the fixtures. And there is, well, I've been given a image really of what all the teams' various records are after round 2, because this is one of the first games of round 3 that we will be seeing. Obviously, as I've said before, I won't be able to show absolutely everything from this tournament because there are so many teams involved. Yeah, there would be simply too much to try and cover, and obviously I've even gone a little bit further now in the sense that we're only going to be viewing the deciding pitch battle from each series, because doing the same siege over and over again is not great. I think, with pitch battles it's a little bit different because they're a little bit more dynamic, a little bit quicker, whereas showing Edoras or Dol Guldur over and over again is going to render those maps pretty stale pretty quickly, so that's why I wanted to avoid those. I think in the intro here, it may have already popped up, or I may just leave it in the description, I'm not sure, but I will showcase the various records of all of the teams as they were going into round 3. And this is a round 3 battle, so let's get on to the compositions first and foremost. So this, once again, is ALEXIOS22 and Batu, who won their opening 2 games, so they've got a very good record going into round 3 here, trying to make it 3-0, and they will be going up against Django over there and FFAmuffins. So some interesting factions involved here today. Let's go through the blue team. So ALEXIOS22 here, playing as Imladris, the first time we've seen them on the open field in this tournament. Of course, a lot of quality that they can bring to bear, but the elves can struggle a little bit with getting overrun and overwhelmed if momentum shifts against them. So they do need to be a little bit careful, but if they can get into melee and start dictating the pace, there's very few factions that can stop them at that point. So swords and spears of Rivendell, which when you're on the open field, I think these guys are kind of a must. In a siege battle, you can maybe go all-out quality, and provided you've got the correct allies, that can really pay dividends, but the army size would be too small on an open field, especially a really open field like the Frozen Lake Bed here. We've seen quite a lot of winter-themed maps, which is ironic considering the weather is finally starting to shift over here in the UK. But yes, Swords of Rivendell and Spears of Rivendell. The God Helene, not too much of a surprise. I mean, archers like this, of course, we've seen in these various pitch battles for the tournament so far, that archers do tend to be a little bit more of a bit part player. They can really influence the early game in particular and sort of manoeuvre the engagement just so. And that will be important for Imladris, of course, but they won't be the be-all and end-all. Indeed, they may end up getting engaged in melee before they'd like, but that's the beauty of having a unit this good. They will be able to fight off most opposition units anyway because of how strong they are. Speaking of which, it's a similar story with the Elder Enway archers. They may not be bodyguard tier, but it's a very similar sort of thing, and there are more of them ultimately, so numbers are a quality all of their own, and the elves certainly will need a bit more of that. Once again, we've got a ballista. Artillery has played, well, it's really an even more extreme example of what I was talking about with the archers, where it's really just to try and set the initial engagement for your benefit, really. We haven't seen them be the be-all and end-all, although in the last pitch battle, which we saw on this very map, of course, we did see on that occasion, it was ALEXIOS and Batu as well, get some good value off against the dwarves with their artillery directly in terms of kills. So we'll see if that's the case again, but Imladris definitely wanting to force the enemy to move in, or dance to their tune, so to speak. Spears of Rivendell over here on the flank. We have a combination of the Gwythi Rockdor and the Elder Enway Lancers, so some massive shock value here from the Elven Cavalry, but also very expensive. I would even go as far to say that if the red team can ensure limited use from these Lancers, it will really cripple the ability of Imladris on the field to do extremely well, but we shall see. It's a big move when you bring this much cavalry, especially as the elves, and indeed a second unit of Elder Enway Lancers as well, in behind a couple of units of Elder Enway Swordmasters. So a small army this, bit of numbers on the front, but yeah, manoeuvring is going to be absolutely key here, and of course the support of his ally Batu, who once again is going to be playing as the Haradrim. Interesting force, the Haradrim on the open field. They kind of a bit like a porcupine, really, in the sense that if you attack them, they're capable of doing so much damage to you, but they do have some defined weaknesses. Their own defensive abilities are somewhat low, so if you can take advantage of that, you can really put Harad in an awkward place, but obviously lots of damage can be done by them very quickly. Another ballista as well, so big artillery presence from the blue team. That's expensive, of course, even for ballistas. It does mean that you're cutting back in other places, though Harad can field a big army far more easily than the elves, of course. Trollmen, very, very dangerous, always a mainstay in the Harad army with how potent their attacking abilities are. Some standard Haradrim spearmen at the back, very cheap of course, but also they're not going to win you the battle, they're just here to act as a bit of a backstop. And one thing that Harad certainly are lower down in tier than the elves are is in their archers. They do have some bit of a token effort here with the Haradrim archers, so they can engage at long range, but unsurprisingly Harad are going to be putting a bit more stock in their potency up close, and a combination of the Serpent Guard and the Southron Pikemen, which in the last battle replay actually were able to do really very, very well in their engagement, which was a difficult one for them as well against that Candish force. It's going to be interesting to see if they can do the same thing here. It's not the most expensive front line, but the Serpent Guard aren't exactly cheap either. 203 of them though. Interesting. We shall see how that goes. More Haradrim Spearmen here on the flank, so both sides trying to pad out their force with some lower tier units. We've got some Serpent Horse Archers as well. Of course we saw them used in the last battle, and the Mumakil, which their presence is always a bit of a looming one in the battles that we've seen them in so far. Even if they don't get involved directly, just them being there is a real problem sometimes for the opposition. So Canned once again facing off against Harad over on this side, a repeat of the last open field encounter that we saw between the two of them. We'll see if Django has better luck. The Chieftain's Vanguard on that occasion of course got overwhelmed by the sheer amount of horse archers that were arrayed against them. That's not so much the case this time. I think the Camel Serpent archers they still outnumber them, so it'd be interesting because the Chieftain's Vanguard are very tanky as an individual unit, but they're going to need some extra support from other ranged units. I think Nomadic archers also in behind here, so definitely in terms of long range skirmishing, Canned should always have the better of Harad really. In here we also have the Veriag Cataphracts. I mean, obviously a very heavy unit of cavalry, maybe not as swift or finesse based as the Gwaithir Rockdor on the other side, but very hefty, and in terms of all-round ability better than anything Harad can field. Outright destruction of course the Mumakil can batter them, but we'll see. One thing that Can didn't do in the last battle was utilise their chariots quickly or aggressively enough, and a couple of units of Brotherhood of the Wain should be able to do that. I wonder if my microphone is picking up the bloody ice cream truck just outside. Not exactly too thematic for this particular situation, is it? Yes, a couple of units of Veriag Horse Archers as well, so going all in for cavalry units here. This is going to be very micro-intensive, and a huge amount of Horse Archers as well, so 2 units of them. Nurad Windblades, of course, melee cavalry, and nomadic archers, so it's an awkward army that Harad have to face, and their lack of ranged units other than their own mounted force might make it a little bit difficult. We'll see. Storm Guard here at the back maybe to try and overall try and win that melee engagement, and then some Veriag warriors at the back as well, several units of them in fact, so this is a full line of infantry. Got their fragilities of course because of their lack of shields, but still an interesting army that from Canned. I mean, if they get the micro right, it could be a real menace for both Harad, who are lightly armoured, and Imladris, who are a little bit lesser in terms of numbers. But FFAmuffins is going to be directly facing off against Imladris first and foremost, as Dorwinion, the first time we've seen them in one of these as well, so Imladris versus Dorwinion, definitely not a repeat. Morroquendi Glade Lords are actually probably, in terms of bodyguard tier cavalry, the most similar to the Gwaithir Rockdor that the game has to offer. Albeit, of course, Dorwinion don't have the same armour even at the highest end that Imladris do, so kind of a halfway house between themselves and maybe some of the more lighter tier Sylvan Elf high cavalry that we have seen elsewhere, but we'll see. There's a ballista way at the back from FFAmuffins. I mean, this is all well and good, but I mean, I don't know whether this was necessarily thought out. I mean, if Can's infantry moves back to maybe help the Dorwinion infantry, this makes a little bit more sense, but way back here we'll see if they unify their approach at all. I mean, Dorwinion do have a few units that can hide, but the Morroquendi bows are here. Again, trading back and forth, they have the damage, but they don't have the same resilience as the Imladris archers. The poison projectiles could come into play though, especially against the Haradrim infantry. Just in behind, the more heavily armoured Elvelin. I mean, they're a decent enough frontline force, but the quality of Imladris and the armour piercing of Harad means they really are just going to be a bit of an armoured block in the way of the units that are genuinely going to try and win the battle for the red team here. Morroquendi Glade Masters preferred to the Hammer Guard, and I think this is because they will be universally more useful against both Imladris and Harad. Of course, that armour piercing in melee not going to be quite so useful against the Haradrim, whereas these guys, there's nothing really Harad have that would really relish going one-to-one with the Glade Masters, and just in general, even Imladris as well will need to commit some pretty serious heavy hitters to beat them. And some Morroquendi pikes here as well. Obviously we saw Harad have brought their own pikes as well, but they're not on the same level as these Morroquendi, though of course still dangerous. Archers will be dangerous to them. So, without further ado, let's get the show on the road. And I think the initial pace of this battle is going to be pretty much entirely decided by how Khand approach things, because of how heavy they've gone on the cavalry. All of these horse archers, I mean, again, like I said, there's a decent amount of ranged presence from the blue team here, but not overwhelming, and the amount of horse archers Khand has means that I really think they could go on the offensive here with all of their ranged cavalry against the Haradrim specifically. And then, like I said, I would move their infantry over to regroup with Dorwinion and then maybe try and overwhelm the Imladris infantry in the late game with sheer numbers and whatever cavalry you have left. It would also force Imladris maybe into utilising their cavalry to try and help out the Haradrim over here. The winter effect on these maps as well is somewhat annoying when you see the grass pop in and out, but so far neither side too eager right at the moment. Morroquendi Stalkers unsurprisingly revealing themselves, a unit of cavalry that can hide anywhere of course. Moving across again, more horse archers as well, obviously can have the lion's share, but just some more from Dorwinion, so it's going to be a bit of a chess match here early on. As soon as someone really commits to an engagement, things are going to cascade, I think, and I think the longer that engagement takes to happen, the better it is for Khand and Dorwinion. The quicker that some sort of universal fight can be initiated, the better it will be for Imladris and Harad. Morroquendi Stalkers firing a couple of arrows downrange, but so far none killed off. Again, this is a little bit of a concern to me. If Khand do move forwards, they need Dorwinion's infantry to come with them. It would be a serious mistake, I think, if Khand were to launch an attack without the direct support of their ally, because that would just leave Imladris and Harad to gang up on Khand. I mean, the archers are moving forward. They do need to be very careful here. Mumakil, I mean, 2 units of the Mumakil is a big investment. Big quality from Imladris, and then significant investments in individual units from Harad as well, so there is a bedrock of their lower tier units for both of the blue team armies here today. Now Dorwinion are moving their infantry. They're going to have to move their ballista pretty quickly though as well. Will they be able to do that? So far, this has been the slowest of these battles to get going. Actually no, that's not true. The very first one we saw was a very slow and plodding affair in the initial stages, wasn't it? Nomadic archers loitering around the periphery. Getting into range now, of course. I mean, it's all well and good, but once again, Imladris, we saw this in the very last battle replay as well, where Alexios was able to get his ballista on the side of that hill over there, and it allows them to start taking pot shots into the enemy. I mean, one thing I will say is that because of the nature of Khan's army here and because of how far flung they are, they won't be able to get the same level of value as they were against those dwarven blocks of infantry last time around. And on that occasion as well, it was truly the worst of both worlds. A couple of Imladris deaths already. Very difficult to see where the arrows are flying as well with the white snowy background. You'll only be able to see flaming shot really. Same is also true of Ballistae. Bit unfortunate really when the vast majority of the action's going to be happening early on here is going to be via archers. We're going to have to just do our best, I suppose. Nomadic archers in place once again, forcing the blue team back a little bit. And trying to get that prime real estate both sides at this point in time. Khand spreading wide. And the problem with this is if this was infantry, of course, the blue team could maybe think about a counter-attack, but because it's cavalry, Khand can simply pull back and be a little bit more liquid in terms of what they're doing. Chariots on the flank. Again, there's only so far that the blue team are going to be able to pull back. When the Dorwinion infantry arrives as well, there's a bit more of a solid backstop. These nomadic archers, though, I mean, there are Brotherhood of the Bow in behind, but yeah, I was going to say Elder Runway Lancers, Ballistae firing across, few Khandish cavalrymen falling by the wayside here, but so far nothing really that either side has done that's been super effective, really. And it's a very awkward force for the blue team to try and fight. It's more a thing that you have to try and outlast more than anything else, and again, a few more archers probably would have been the answer. Morroquendi Stalkers and Glade Lords moving forward, the Gwythy Rockdoor. Need to be a bit careful, I don't want to get caught out completely by all of the units over here. There's plenty of arrow fire that could find their way into the finest Elven Riders of Middle-earth. Again, they're not going to take a huge amount of casualties from these initial volleys, but the damage will build up. The nearby support is also a real concern. There's 2 ballistae, the big investment from the blues as well. What's going on here? I mean, Brotherhood of the Wain, gotta be a bit careful against those Serpent Horse Archers. Chieftain's Vanguard as well. Again, more harassment, the occasional kill here and there. Again, still forcing Harad back. I always get a little bit nervous when a team is constantly on the back foot like this, but trying to set up a decent, solid position. I don't think the red team really need to panic too much even if they get into that solid position though, purely because, like I said, they don't have the sheer amount of archers that would be sufficient to ward off this assault anyway. Ballista pivoting on the spot. Still the Haradrim fire with their own artillery as well. Again, a little bit of a weird situation going on here, just as it was in the last battle replay as well, where they're content to just sort of stand there and take it, which, like I said, is not going to be quite so crippling to Khand as it was to Erebor last time out, but this damage is adding up, and ultimately they don't have the luxury in terms of infantry numbers, the red team, to be... Hello. What is going on here? I mean, the chariot... Oh, I don't agree with this move. That was a little bit foolhardy, I think. Whatever Django was trying to do with just 1 unit of chariots there has absolutely failed. That was a poor idea. Whatever. I want to know what the thinking behind that was. But, yeah, they should have just waited. Again, just taking pot shots with the crossbows would have been better. There's no rush if you're the red team in this situation. If you're going for this many mounted projectiles, you need to have patience. Rush of blood to the head, and that's bad. Again, chariots are pretty expensive, and that's a good example of chariots being a bit of an all-or-nothing kind of unit, and in this case, very much self-inflicted nothing. And the ballista continuing to ratchet up little bits of efficiency as well. Again, need to be a little bit bolder with the sheer amount of projectiles they have at their disposal here, the red team. Whatever potential advantage they could have, they are steadily throwing away here in the early stages. Haradrim Ballista continuing to fire. So far, after all, it has been the ballistas, or ballistae, of the blue team that have been getting that slow burn of casualties, when you would have expected it to be the other way round. Have we here Brotherhood of the Bow, loitering with intent. The new target of the ballista bolts, one flying just in there. Nomadic archers. Still got 1 unit of Brotherhood of the Wain, of course, but you've got those specialty units. Harad still have both of them kill. Canned down a unit of chariots. Again, trying to set the table here, the red team. And so far, I mean, this is definitely an example so far of a battle where the initial stages have actually gone in favour of the team which have been more defensive in nature. Ballista forcing the enemy forward. I mean, Morroquendi bows now moving in. Going to try and do some damage to the relatively lightweight Elven front line. Of course, shields may be pointing in the right direction, but it's not the biggest shield value, and even with the armour upgrades, it's, in comparison to the rest of Imladris, a little bit lowly. So this is one of the forces where the Morroquendi bows can do their damage, and this I agree with. I mean, just firing your arrows into a front line directly under normal circumstances, if it's well made with shields at the front like this, is not the best of ideas, but on this occasion I kind of think it is. I mean, again, like, if you were going to shoot the ballista crew you really should have started a little bit earlier. At this point, casualties have already started to mount at its hands. But again, indiscriminate fire into the blue team is where I would have gone with this. Horse archer fire, and then later on you can use the horse archers as a makeshift bludgeon alongside whatever infantry you have, and the casualties will mean that numbers are reasonably even. The Mumakil are always a concern, especially with the compositions that the red team have, but that's something that you can just deal with later on. It's not as if you're completely defenceless against them. Stuff like the Morroquendi pikes are fairly ideal, in fact. So you have the options. I mean, now the Dorwinion ballista has moved forward. Again, I feel like it's more of a set plan right from the off, and the team who have the more clearly defined plan seem to be having the better of it here in the early stages, whereas the red team, in spite of the fact that their plans should be very clear with their composition, they seem to have been stuttering and not willing to fully commit to it. But we'll see how it goes. The Morroquendi biding their time. And artillery duels are very different now that it's not just a case of instant demise. I think ballista versus ballista is still going to be one of those situations that, ooh, unfortunate friendly fire there. Health and safety, that's definitely going to be a form that has to be submitted by someone. So why did you discharge the ballista when your crew member was standing directly in front of it? In the grand scheme of things though, still, nomadic archers moving forward. Again, I mean, you could argue that it shouldn't really be the case based on the armies that are on the field, but the blue team have been allowed to get good value with their artillery, and when you're spending this much on something, that's exactly what you want. Harad archers now also firing away, and nomadic archers doing nothing in response. It's a little bit of a frustrating watch this, actually, from a red team perspective. I mean, of course, in the grand scheme of things, the casualties from both sides are still not particularly high, so, as I said, when the actual battle itself gets fully underway, we'll get a much better idea of who's going to come out on top. But if it does come down to just a big old brawl, you would back the blue team because they have the numbers and quality advantage in melee, you would suggest, and that comes about mostly as a result of the Candish composition. And the God Helene now getting into position. I mean, as far as a singular archer goes on the field, they are definitely the scariest. And surely this is going to elicit some sort of response from the Candish force now. Brotherhood of the Wain still waiting. I mean, it's not even as if Cand is waiting for Dorwinion to do anything in particular. I mean, maybe disable the artillery? And in fairness, in this little artillery duel, Dorwinion is actually getting the better of the Imladris ballista. So that's something. Better late than never, I suggest. But, or is it? No, yeah, it is. The angle must be just so that this, even though they're way out in the open here, the Dorwinion ballista, the arc of fire is favourable for them. Morroquendi stalkers still loitering. I mean, it is a decent defensive position here. From Dorwinion's perspective, of course, they're facing an Imladris force which is on the crest of this hill with good support behind them, archers and cavalry. So it is an intimidating thing, even if it is only a minor slope. It's the biggest bit of terrain that this battle has. Of course, the rocks acting as a little bit of cover as well. But they don't need to advance fully into them. They just need to engage in a campaign of harassment, basically. But I think it might be a little bit too late for that already for the red team, because if they were going to do that, we would have seen more examples of it already. And when even stuff like the Harad archers are being allowed to get good value. Myriad warriors now taking hits again, just loitering. It's not been a good performance by Cand so far in this battle, to be brutally honest. Pretty much everything has gone wrong for them, and most of it has been self-inflicted. Nomadic archers moving back, and now, I mean, emboldened perhaps, Harad have decided to throw caution to the wind and move forwards. I mean, this is where Harad, or Cand rather, could counter-attack and start making, again, the fact the cavalry is being able to get charges off. A combination of Variag Cataphracts and Nurad Windblades were here for this very reason, surely to stop this sort of thing from happening, but Variag and Nomadic Warriors getting caught on the business end of the Imladris Lancers, and many of them now lie dead in the snow. Elder Renway Lancers, victory, almost a certainty now, and yeah, it's been poor. Very, very poor. And now the Elder Renway Lancers move forward. All of these Horse Archers will be able to do some good damage on the approach. I mean, they are moving forward, the Variag Cataphracts filtering through their own cavalry. I mean, that's a fight the Lancers certainly won't win. Gwaithir Rockdor would, of course. And it is actually now time for the first instance, really, of half speed, I think, in this fight, because things are going to get pretty chaotic pretty quickly, but a combination of the Elven Cavalry and the Harad Infantry Force moving forward, the Mumakil, of course, in direct support, stuff like the Dismounted Serpent Guard with pike support is going to be enough to deal with the majority of the Khandish infantry force, because the majority of it is just unupgraded Variag warriors, and they're shaken as a result of the Elven Cavalry giving them the business as well. The Storm Guard really are the exception, but they're not really in close proximity. Nomadic Archers fleeing, and you can see the chaos here. Like, it's at this point, from the high perspective, it's just a mob fleeing backwards. All of that time spent setting the table, all to be undone with one large push forwards. Morroquendi bows are there, and Stalkers also linking their forces, moving as one more effectively. Again, the Gwaithir Rockdor. The fact that these guys have been able to get, or, well, they've been given effectively free rein to get some good charges off, does not bode well for the Reds. Over here, you can see the Variag Cataphracts moving forward, charging into the Serpent Guard, but the close proximity of the Southron Pikemen is going to make any efficient use of cavalry aggressively like that more difficult. Indeed, if you're going to retreat like this, covering the retreat and dealing with the enemy cavalry was probably the play. Variag Horse Archers now getting chased down by the Camel Riders and the Mumakil, and of course both of which have their own missiles that are going to be launched in response to the Khandish cover. Brotherhood of the Wain, of course, I mean, they're better against blocks of infantry. Mumakil will not shudder at the impact of the chariots the way that many other units will. Elder Renway Lancers also now sweeping forth. Variag Horse Archers on the retreat and getting routed as well. This Elven Cavalry has been given way, way too much freedom. With how dangerous Elven Cavalry of this type is, the fact that they've been able to feast upon some good kills here, given the kind of cavalry that the Reds have at their disposal. I mean, they're going to be able to do some good damage with the Morroquendi bows perhaps, but not the kind of damage quickly that the Elven Cavalry has been doing. I mean, Glade Lords going on the offensive, I mean, that I think is one of the weirder aspects here. The kind of engagements that have happened have always been in the blue team's favour, but weirdly it's been on the red team's terms. The blue team have been given a few gifts here, I think, in the sense that the red team could have responded to what they've been doing differently throughout the entire battle, really, and instead they've acted in exactly the way the blue team would have hoped in most situations. But weirdly, we're still in a situation where the battle is far from decided. I think we'll see here in the late game, though, the losses that have mounted up for the red team in terms of, again, like, what is going on? Where is the cavalry? The Windblades are right there, and they're running away, leaving the Elven Archers. I mean, Morroquendi bows have got spears and, well, glaives in melee, so they're not defenceless to cavalry in melee, but off a charge like this, they should have been on station far sooner. And the Glade Lords themselves, of course. If Dorwinion can't rely on their ally, they should at least be able to rely on themselves. Forward come the Spears of Rivendell, again hoping to entrap cavalry as their units that have charged in retreat. Narad Storm Guard taking hits as well. They have pulled back. I mean, maybe the red team wanted to be the defenders in this situation based on how Dorwinion set up way at the back of the map, but if that's the case, Khan's composition doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't really, it's one of those situations where I'm struggling really to grasp what the red team must have been thinking. I mean, again, a victory could be pulled out. Serpent Archers, the on-foot variant of the Camel Riders, loosing more of their poison arrows into the red team. Any hit scored is going to be of use here, and even a bit of friendly fire from the red team's artillery through their Alvalin infantry. But again, just one unit of Alvalin. They'll be grateful at least that their artillery is now able to do a bit of damage. The Blues setting themselves up on the flank, and I think as soon as they're ready to move in with these horse archers, with this Haradrim infantry, with the Mumakil as well, that's when they will move forward from the front. Although again, I mean, we've got some Nandor Glade Guard that have revealed themselves, Eldarenway Swordmasters charging into the Alvalin infantry, and that's going to end pretty poorly for the men in purple. But some support from the Glade Masters will change that. The Ballista Crews getting involved now as well. So again, half speed, because this is going to be the moment that the battle is decided once and for all. Eldarenway Swordmasters getting overrun really in terms of numbers, so this could be the first instance of the blue team maybe falling into the same kind of traps that the red team have found themselves falling into, where they haven't been quick enough to commit where their strengths lie. Of course, if the elves can hold on from the front long enough, this flanking force from Harad could crunch in. I mean, we haven't really seen the Trollmen as of yet. That would be, I mean, Variag Cataphracts getting in behind the lines, doing some damage to the Haradrim archers, but getting caught in and amongst the Haradrim spearmen in the process. As soon as those Trollmen get involved, that will be a big damage spike, and this is the part of the line where the Alvalin are as well, where they will be at their most efficient. So I'm a little bit surprised they're not moving forward already, especially with pikes on the way. You're going to need as much strength on this front line as possible. The Eldarenway Swordmasters doing the business up close, but as soon as more and more of those Elven units arrive, it could get a little bit dicier. Can the red team turn this around late on? It's hard to sort of tell how much damage perhaps the Khandish horse archers have been doing over the long haul in this battle. Again, like I said, the arrows do tend to blend into the snowy background. Eldarenway archers doing their thing. Defeat seems certain. Wendy's stalkers loitering with intent as well. These front lines a little bit thin on the ground now, going to need reinforcements to move in, but I mean, this is the problem. Do the red team have the ability to hold Harad at bay? I mean, it's the Mumakil looming in the background. The infantry force is all well and good, but this is just going to hold people in place, and the Mumakil going to roll forward. Southron pikemen moving in, plenty of those Haradrim spearmen as well. Lowly as they may be, there are a lot of them, compromising the enemy backlines. Variag warriors now shaken up as well. Cavalry having its impact. Serpent horse archers charging in, wavering. If Khan start to rout on this flank before the Mumakil are even truly here. In come the Mumakil now. Mumakil and Trollmen, so this is where Harad will drop the hammer, you would suggest. Getting a really nice, almost a perfect charge down the length of that Alvalin infantry unit there. Again, the difference between... don't know where that second unit of chariots necessarily went. Dead, perhaps, already. Variag Cataphracts in the backfield. Alvalin infantry trying their best, a flanking force of their own, but it's not quite as substantial as the one that Harad have here. The Nandor Glade Guard, but I mean, as long as the Mumakil keep moving here, the chaos that they cause and the occasional unit that they rout is only going to assist, really. Although, to be fair, these Variag Cataphracts later on here have really done a number on Imladris' force, and Dorwinion in general have managed to push Imladris back. Their lack of numbers proving to be a bit of an issue. Eldarenway archers facing off against the Chieftain's vanguard in melee. Still some Moragwendi stalkers, Variag horse archers pinging a few shots wider as well, but Harad are too strong, I think, later on. Imladris' smaller army may have meant they started to falter here, but I don't think they're going to have the gumption to deal with the Harad numbers. Dorwinion general getting run through by a trollman with his serrated blade. Wendy bows moving forward. I mean, the Haradrim spearmen here in the vanguard, they've been shaken the whole time they've been doing it, but they have managed to continue their advance. So fair play to them. Further afield, Storm Guard still fighting, but very much getting outnumbered by Serpent Guard and Southron Pikemen. Victory a distinct possibility for the Elvalin. Arrows flying all over the place, still Serpent Archers and Haradrim Archers offering some range support as well from Harad. This combination of Harad plus an Elven faction seems to have been pretty effective in both of the games so far, as well as the tactics that they have employed, although certainly in the case of this battle I think the red team did not help themselves. In the end the percentages started to really go against them. Meanwhile Nandor Glade Guard flying all over the place as the Mumakil falls on them. I mean, they'll be glad that one of the great beasts has been slain, but the Elven Archers, despite being targeted, still have enough of them left. And again, it's been the case in this tournament so far that when a plan A fails, or a plan A isn't going very well, very few, or the team that does not have a backup plan, all able to react to their plan failing, go on to lose. But in this case I don't really think the red team's plan A even got going in the first place, and then everything got a little bit broken up from there. Many self-inflicted wounds here from them, I would suggest, and as a result 3-0. 3-0 for Alexios and Batu. This tournament has gone very well for them thus far, definitely making their play to get to the finals. And that is that. Well fought victory. The right side certainly won. There goes the Candice General. After the admission of defeat comes, he gets cut down. But yeah, like I said, I think the red team, if they'd have been more forthcoming with their ranged units, if they just basically indiscriminately sent their horse archers and archers forward and fired into the blue team, I think they really ought to have won this fight, actually, based on how, you know, the infantry engagements towards the end, they were having some joy, despite the fact that up till that point in the battle, the earlier harassment phases had gone squarely in favour of the blue team. They were still able to put up a fight, so that, I think, was the key here. With that kind of army composition, I thought that was what they were going to do, but they waited too long, and when they did commit units, it was questionable. That the loss of that unit of chariots, which basically suicide charged early on, was poor. And yeah, just that sort of thing really did add up. But fair play to Alexios and Batu. They had their plan, they stuck to it, and when the time came, they moved. I think they could tell, really, that they had managed to build up a decent store of kills, really, with their own archers and with their artillery. They noticed how odd the setup from the red team was, and they decided to counter-attack. It paid off, and that decision meant that there was really no recovering for the red team, so fair play. Alexios' army, Imladris, Eldarenway archers built up a good amount of kills over time. Eldarenway swordmasters late on did well, mostly against standard Elvelyn infantry, so the level of quality, you know, there's a fairly big discrepancy there, but it is what it is. In particular, that cavalry performance, though, the Gwaithir Rockdor and the Eldarenway lancers. Again, it's one of those situations where even at that point in the battle, the red team could have turned things around by leveraging their cavalry strength and using them defensively to prevent any sort of kills on their retreat. In the end, though, very bizarrely, they allowed, essentially, the Gwaithir Rockdor and the Eldarenway lancers to run roughshod over them. So, that is that. Big kills there. Relatively small army. Paid off in the end, of course. Imladris ended up taking off. Well, there was a very small amount of Imladris left. Most of the forces left on the field were Haradrim in the end, but when you have an army that small, I guess that is to be expected. The discrepancy between Imladris and Harad with more than double the elves on the field here today, whereas Cand and Dorwinion with more similar numbers. So yeah, I'd say that it's going to be interesting to see how the tournament develops as we start making our way through the rounds, and obviously eventually we will get to more of a knockout phase as well, which will be interesting. And again, like I said, It's in its own playlist now, these tournament battles, and at the end of every round, if we move across from, say, round 3 into round 4 or something like that, I will try and post up an image of the current, or at least leave one in the description of the current standings and the current records. But certainly Alexios and Batu will be near the top, because there can't be that many teams that are 3-0 at this point. So yeah, big thank you to the players for being a part of this tournament battle. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me.